Hello YouTube. Bane666 here. Welcome to Propaganda of Toxic Feminism, the series in which I expose and debunk falsehoods, misconceptions, and outright lies spread about the men's rights movement. So let's get stuck into it. We are up to number 7 in Kevin Logan's The 10 Worst Lies Spread by the Men's Rights Movement. I wonder what half-truths and logical fallacies he has for us this time.
Number 7. Women have been secretly controlling the world throughout human history. Now this is a particularly rare one because even most of the fucking idiots who make up the men's rights movement know how patently absurd this one is.
So by Kevin's own admission, this so-called belief is rare amongst MRAs, yet it still makes his top 10 worst lies spread by the men's rights movement list.
Yet that did not stop a small number of the educationally subnormal ass clowns over at A Voice for Men coming up with their gynocratic history timeline. Now I'd like to have done a point-by-point breakdown in a separate video of this timeline, but it has subsequently been taken down by that particular digital shitpit.
So why is Hitchen's razor important? Well, there are a number of reasons. For example, the article that Kevin refers to might never have existed, and might be entirely his creation. How are we to know? Assuming it does exist, then Kevin may have only read about it secondhand, from such unbiased sources as Man Boobs or Man Cheese. And when I say unbiased, I'm being sarcastic, as we all know those sites have a habit of being creatively interpretational with the truth. But let's assume Kevin did actually read the article himself. How do we know he is giving us an honest interpretation? Maybe he misunderstood it, or maybe he read it through a biased lens, or possibly he is outright lying. And we have no way of finding out, or reading the source material for ourselves, and making up our own minds. All we have to go on is Kevin's word, and based on his videos so far, I have to say, that's nowhere near good enough. In my personal opinion, you are better off not making an argument that cannot be somehow backed up with evidence. And considering Kevin stated that number 7 is only believed by a small number of MRAs, and that at the start of his video he claimed that.
Now this is not meant to be an exhaustive list, as quite frankly there would be far too much to fit into one video, and they're in no particular order of severity or frequency of use.
He would have been much better off going with something else. But then again, I guess the same could be said for just about all of his list. Next.
Now to any of the idiots who still believe this particular lie, all I would say is, take off the tinfoil hat and crack open a fucking book. Or at the very least, go outside and get some fresh air, because clearly being cooped up indoors is not good for your brain.
Now, I haven't read the article in question, so it's impossible to say if it actually said,
women have been secretly controlling the world throughout human history.
To me, this sounds like hyperbole on Kevin's part. And most likely the article discussed that women had far more influence and power than the feminist interpretation of history would have us believe. But I guess we'll never know, will we? Kevin will return with number 8 in a little while, but in the meantime. Next. Next up we have a video made by feminists, who have never actually talked to MRAs, but instead have gotten all their information from Man Boobs and Tumblr. This should be fun.
Hey, I'm William. I'm an MRA. Some of you don't understand what a men's rights activist is yet, so I'm here to gently break it down. Here's why I believe firmly in MRA and the causes we champion. Let's agree to disagree. Women have it pretty good in society. Women get paid so much money. Hillary Clinton, Michelle Obama, Kimberly Kardashian.
Oh look, someone's trying to debunk the wage gap debunking. And failing. I guess he doesn't know that young women in their 20s are out earning young men in their 20s. Of course this starts to change once they start having children. Once again, the wage gap is about choice, not discrimination. But nice straw fedora dude. Next.
They're not broke. My relationship with my mom. It's so complicated.
You'll note that this entire video is this type of stuff. where they just attack the character of MRAs, and don't actually address any actual issues or concerns. Next.
I love women. Real women. Pamela Anderson, Anna Nicole Smith, Jessica Rabbit.
Oh right, because MRAs only respect women that have massive breasts. That's why Karen Strawn is so popular. It's because of her massive basketball-sized tits, instead of her intellectual ability. It's also clearly why so many MRAs have such love and respect for Lacey Green. Right? It's all about the busty substances, and not the quality of the argument, right? Once again, this is just a pathetic attempt at trying to portray all MRAs as shallow sexists. Next.
The new Mad Max made me angry, because it wasn't exactly the way I wanted it. The Mad Max that I remember from when I was a kid had a strong male role, the strongest male role. Mel Gibson.
Oh no. Not this Mad Max shit that I'm seeing everywhere. Okay, let's look at the facts. Aaron Clarey wrote an article for Return of Kings about the new Mad Max, and the feminists on the internet exploded, claiming that this was in fact the opinion of all MRAs everywhere. First off, Aaron Clarey is not an MRA, although to be fair, he has collaborated with Paul Elam on a book. Secondly, Return of Kings is not an MRA site. As you can clearly see by, actually looking at their website. Thirdly, one guy's opinion does not constitute everyone's opinion. I know this may be hard for the feminist hive mind to understand.
Resistance is futile.
But Aaron Clarey does not speak for me, nor does he speak for all MRAs, and to my knowledge, nor does he claim to. Because he's not even a fucking MRA. As for Mad Max, I haven't seen it yet, so obviously cannot give an opinion at this time. I will eventually see it though, as I'm a big fan of Tom Hardy. I love the movie Bronson, by the way. If you haven't seen it, go watch it after you finish this video. Trust me. But Tom Hardy is a great actor, so for that reason alone, I will eventually see the new Mad Max, and I will form my own opinion, which may or may not agree with Mr. Clarey's assessment. But what a shame so much of the feminist-dominated media makes such a fuss over one guy's opinion, instead of actually addressing real men's rights issues that affect the lives of men and boys. Not a surprise really. Next.
Women shouldn't be on money. I already see them everywhere I go. What if I get sick of seeing them?
Oh, that's right, because there are no images of women on money.
How much is a penny? How much is a nickel? How much is a dime? How much is a quarter? A penny is one, a nickel is five, a dime is 10, and a quarter is 25. How much is a penny? How much is a nickel? How much is a dime?
Dad bod should be celebrated because I feel insecure, and it's a fun way to mask my self-hate. It's a fun word too.
I've got no idea what he's saying here. I must have listened to it 100 times. To me, it sounded like he said dad bots. I've never heard of dad bots, so I did a Google search, and it redirected me to a music group called Deadbots. Still not sure if that's what he said. They do have a video clip with naked women, so possibly. I even rewatched his clip on YouTube with the closed caption switched on. Still didn't help. So if anyone knows what he's talking about, please comment below. But of course he finishes off the sentence yet again with a character attack, and not an argument, because all MRAs are only MRAs because they are insecure, right? Next.
I catcall women because I have no personality, and I'm afraid they'll make fun of me. Rightfully so.
Oh, it's the MRAs doing all the catcalling. Of course this is yet another example of trying to attack the character of MRAs, while avoiding the actual issues. Next.
Black Widow is obviously a slut because I haven't had a date in 3 years.
Are there actually any MRAs attacking the character of Black Widow? It was the feminists that attacked Joss Whedon on Twitter because they didn't like Black Widow's portrayal in the new Avengers movie. So I guess we'll chalk this one up to projection. And again, of course, attacking the character of MRAs, while avoiding actual men's rights issues. Next.
If women get equal pay, they'll never have to depend on me. and then I'll really have to develop a personality.
Yeah, the thing is, women have been getting equal pay for equal work for 50 years. And once again, an attack on the character of MRAs, while avoiding actual men's rights issues. Next.
So the next time you see a man, remember, just because you can't see our problems, doesn't mean we haven't projected them onto you yet.
Wow, that's hilarious. Don't you just love these type of videos where the feminist spends all their time attacking what they think MRAs are, but never actually address what we really are, or the issues we actually bring up? I'm just going to play this clip here, and be done with it.
My head, I'd be scratching while my thoughts were busy hatching if I only had a brain.
Number 8. Roman numerals. Feminists want to turn everything into rape. MRAs will tell you that feminists want to redefine the word rape to mean basically anything so they can incriminate men and make all men rapists.
Okay, let's examine this claim and see if it's true. From Radical Wind. PIV is always rape, okay. PIV stands for penis in vagina, by the way. Just to recall a basic fact, intercourse, PIV is always rape, plain and simple. This is a developed recap from what I've been saying in various comments here and there in the last 2 years or so. As a radfem, I've always said PIV is rape, and I remember being disappointed to discover that so few radical feminists stated it clearly. How can you possibly see it otherwise? Intercourse is the very means through which men oppress us, from which we are not allowed to escape, yet some instances of PIV and intercourse may be chosen and free. That makes no sense at all. First, well, intercourse is never sex for women. Only men experience rape as sexual and define it as such. Sex for men is the unilateral penetration of their penis into a woman, or anything else replacing and symbolizing the female orifice, whether she thinks she wants it or not, which is the definition of rape, that he will do it anyway and that he uses her and treats her as a receptacle. In all circumstances, it makes no difference to him experiencing it as sexual. That is, at the very least, men use women as useful objects and instruments for penetration, and women are dehumanized by this act. It is an act of violence. So, according to this radical feminist, anytime a man has penetrative sex with a woman, it's rape. Even if the woman wanted to have sex, even if she enjoyed it, even if she initiated it, even if she were to take advantage of him while he was passed out drunk, which, you know, would be rape if the genders were switched. Even under those circumstances, the guy would be the rapist in her view. I shit you not. Now I assume that Kevin has had sex with a woman at some point in his life, which according to this radical feminist, would make him a rapist, along with the vast majority of male feminists, MRAs and men in general, including myself. But this is just one lone radfem nut job, right? Well, admittedly her views are extreme for your average feminist, although fairly typical for a radfem. But even your typical feminist beliefs are just a watered-down version of this bullshit. For example, from Jezebel. Is there a rapist-in-waiting in every guy? I'm sure this won't be offensive. The author of the article quotes feminist Greg Layton. Men, by and large, have a rape switch. All men are capable of rape. Most men are enculturated in a way that reduces rape, and in some societies it is probably true that most violent rape is carried out by individuals who are reasonably labeled as pathological. In other societies, this is not so true. In post-war societies such as those described in some of these links, or any society in a state of war, rape becomes routine. The rape switch is flipped to the on position as a matter of course. Most men who were in combat in Vietnam raped. Similar circumstances have been documented for other wars. Most men in combat in Vietnam were rapists, really Greg? And men have a rape switch? Wow. But let's continue. Layton argues not necessarily that society makes men rapists, but that it keeps most men from raping under most circumstances. When taken outside of the bonds of normal society, men become increasingly more likely to rape. Logan adds. The switch is a term I first heard from Victoria Brandon, who wrote a term paper for me on this in 1993. The basic idea of a switch would be supported if more or less randomly, though age-biased, likely, selected men, put into a certain situation, tended to commit rape on a much larger scale, or more exactly, a much larger percentage of the men raped under those circumstances than would ever be predicted based on anything anyone knows about these men before or after the circumstances prevail. In other words, when all the young men stay home, they are mostly not going to rape anyone. In contrast, when the same exact men go off to war, an alarming percentage of them rape. Switch off, switch on. And a bit later in the article. My other concern is that it ignores, to a degree, the role society plays in inculcating and reinforcing rape culture. Logan uses this quote from Sharon Tiffany's and Kathleen Adams' article Anthropology's Fierce Yanomami, Narratives of Sexual Politics in the Amazon. Imagine a society in which one woman in every 3 is raped, usually by a man she knows. Consider the consequences of living in a society where 1/3 of all women are beaten during pregnancy and 35% of women using emergency medical facilities are battered. Since we are anthropologists, readers may mistakenly think that these appalling data were collected in an exotic society and distant world where it is presumed that unpredictable and threatening behavior is commonplace. Indeed, our friends and colleagues inevitably ask if it is safe for us to travel alone to remote and problematic places which presumably do not enjoy the law and order of civilization. They are, of course, talking about the United States. It's tough to say that men have a rape switch, or a violence switch, that is off when we live in an incredibly violent society that, at a minimum, tolerates horrific levels of violence against women. So in other words, rape is natural for men. But society trains men not to rape, well at least some men. But what about the 1 in 3 claim in the article? Where does this 1 in 3 women will be raped in America claim come from? I mean, we even have Patricia J. Williams, professor of law at Columbia University, making this claim during a gender and women's studies panel at UC Berkeley.
That really reflects, I think, the trauma of 1 in 3 women having experienced rape in this country, but our lack of legal, prosecutorial, police response to that.
So where does this 1 in 3 women in America will be raped claim come from? Well, I tracked it down about a year and a half ago, and as far as I can tell, it comes from the 1 in 3 Women campaign. This campaign states that 1 in 3 women is a simple yet powerful message. It is the statistic used in the 2003 United Nations Women's Development Fund's UNIFEM report on violence against women worldwide. 1 in 3 women in the world will be raped, beaten, sexually coerced, trafficked or otherwise abused in her lifetime. Now, you'll note that this statistic does not just include sexual violence, but physical violence as well. Not to mention that the term, otherwise abused, is subjective and open to interpretation. Using this metric, could we not conclude that 1 out of every 2 men, or possibly every man, could fall into this category? After all, men are statistically far more likely to be victims of violence. But back to the claims about rape. So as far as I can tell, the 1 in 3 women in the world will be raped, beaten, sexually coerced, trafficked or otherwise abused in her lifetime claim, was then transformed into 1 in 3 women worldwide will be raped. Interesting how physical violence and otherwise abused, were as if by magic, transformed into rape. But it gets worse. Because everywhere in the world has the same level of rapes, right? I mean, America and the Democratic Republic of the Congo would both have the same level of rape, right? Well, as illogical as it might sound, that's the assumption made by some feminists. So, 1 in 3 women worldwide will be raped, now becomes, 1 in 3 women in America will be raped. I believe this is the most likely scenario of how we get this crazy statistic. But there may be another explanation. Neutron Magnetar sent me a link almost a year ago to yet another study. Prevalence and psychological sequelae of self-reported childhood physical and sexual abuse, in a general population sample of men and women. So let's look at its findings. Sexual abuse. A total of 66 men and 152 women, 14.2% and 32.3%, respectively, reported childhood experiences that satisfy the current criteria for sexual abuse, which is about 1 in 3 women. Please note though, that this is sexual abuse, which has a broader definition than rape, and that the sample size was very small. So what questions about sexual abuse were asked in the survey? The 2 sexual abuse items are, 1. Before the age of 18, did anyone 5 or more years older than you ever kiss or touch you in a sexual way, or have you touched them in a sexual way? And 2. Before the age of 18, did anyone less than 5 years older than you use physical force to kiss or touch you in a sexual way, or force you to touch them in a sexual way? Additional items assess how often these acts occurred, the subject's age at first and last time it occurred, whether any event included oral, anal, vaginal penetration, total number of individuals who perpetrated these acts, whether any of these individuals were family members, and how upsetting the subject found the event to be at the time it occurred. So it's at this point I'm going to relate a personal story. I was 21 at the time, which was a little while ago now, and a regular at a local nightclub in the city. I was friends with a female regular there who I will call S. It was pretty clear that S liked me, and it was also very clear that I liked S, but for some reason, even though she was clearly interested, things never went beyond friends, and I never pushed the issue or pressured her. But that changed one particular night, when I was particularly drunk, and to my surprise she made the first move that resulted in about 10 minutes of passionate kissing, after which she pulled away again, much to my drunken confusion. But I never pushed the issue, and left it at that. The following week, we had a talk, and I discovered the reason behind her confusing behavior. Now I had seen her show her driver's license to the nightclub security numerous times to get into the nightclub, but obviously I'd never had a close look at it, and obviously neither did they, because it was fake. She wasn't in fact 18 as she had told me and everyone else, but was in fact only 16. This of course explained her confusing behavior. And nothing else ever happened beyond friendship. Trust me, she looked a lot older than 16. But using the criteria for the survey, which states, before the age of 18, did anyone 5 or more years older than you ever kiss or touch you in a sexual way, or have you touched them in a sexual way? Using this criteria, I sexually assaulted her. Even though we only kissed, I was unaware of her actual age. She made the first move, and I was very drunk. Which would mean I was technically unable to give consent, so come to think of it, maybe I'm the victim. Oh hold on, I cannot be because I have a penis. And trust me, this type of story is not uncommon. As someone who has a lot of female friends, I can tell you that a fair percentage of them were sneaking into nightclubs when they were still underage. So to sum up, some feminists believe that all sexual intercourse with males is rape. Others believe that all males are potential rapists, and that all men should be feared. While others either through ignorance, stupidity or malice distort rape statistics, or continually broaden the definition. Of course female offenders are never spoken about. Next.
That is clearly and patently not the fucking case. In fact, the campaigning that feminists have done have forced groups like the FBI to redefine rape so that men who get raped are now classified in there as well.
Well, considering I recently saw the new kid do an excellent takedown of this very claim, I'll let him handle this one. Take it away, mate.
The claim that feminists have remained silent on this is just plain false. First of all, feminists fought front and center to change the federal definition of rape to include male victims, which it previously hadn't.
The real reason feminism fought front and center to get the federal definition of rape changed was not to include male victims. That is just false, 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 false. It was to include more female victims of rape.
It was the Feminist Majority Foundation and Ms. Magazine that launched the campaign called Rape is Rape, culminating in changes to the old definition that didn't include men.
You see, if you look at the federal definition, it focuses on the word penetration, something only men can do, technically. Feminists are fine to include men as victims as long as men are also the victimizers. Hence the focus on penetration and not the force of sex without consent, so I guess men aren't technically having sex unless they are penetrated. For this to be taken seriously, they would also have to fight to include the forced envelopment of the penis as well. But we cannot be making women possible perpetrators of rape, now can we? At least not legally under the definition of the law. So show me a campaign and how much money is going into that campaign talking about forced envelopment. We can then revisit this equality debate again.
Second, Feminist led the broad coalition advocating for the Prison Rape Elimination Act of 2003, which works to protect all prisoners from sexual assault, the majority of whom are men.
But that wasn't the reason why feminists fought for it, now was it? Nope. From Angela Davis's Are Prisons Obsolete, one of your own sources by the way, thanks for that, we found that male correctional employees have vaginally, anally, and orally raped female prisoners and sexually assaulted and abused them. Well, I'm not condoning what these officers did, but don't pretend that feminism cared about male prison rape. If we want to use your "but women get it worse" argument, well, here men get it worse, and feminism still focuses more on women.
Repeatedly, you may also note that women and feminists have been in the forefront of challenging rape in the military, which also affects many men.
Again, not for men's sake, but for women's sake.
Prison rape remains a really serious issue and affects thousands,
hundreds of thousands,
and is certainly something that deserves more attention than it currently receives, including among feminists. However, among those who are fighting on the issue, feminists are there and they are not silent.
Just to note, the Prison Rape Elimination Act of 2003 was passed under the same guidelines as all other acts feminism fought for. The 14th Amendment kept it gender neutral, so it happened to help men. But the reason why it was created in the first place was because women were victims. Men were not the primary intended beneficiaries. They were the spillover. All in all, when feminism builds a campaign wanting to include all unconsensual sex as rape in the federal definition and not just the penetration part, let's talk.
For the record, new kid, I'm really enjoying your, Dear Lauren Southern, Why I Am Not a Feminist, series at the moment. Keep up the good work. Next.
They're trying to protect men and women from being fucking raped. It's also, and can you see a theme developing here, a massive piece of hypocrisy on the part of the MRM, as it is they who wish to redefine rape, so that basically nobody is a fucking rapist.
No, actually, we would like to include forced envelopment as a form of rape. And it would also be nice if we, as a society, paid more attention to female sexual perpetrators. And not just female on male, but female on female, and female on child. None of which are ever talked about by feminists. Our other concerns with rape are due process and the demand by many feminists that an alleged female victim's word should be the only evidence needed, but we'll get to that with point 9 in your list, won't we, Kevin? So at this point, Kevin shows us numerous clips of supposed MRAs apparently promoting rape. So let's keep count of how many of these supposed MRAs are actually MRAs.
This bleeds into things like date rape, where there may actually be some elements of a normal relationship, and indeed, in many such cases, the victims know their attackers. Here, the desire for sexual gratification from the male plays a larger part than the physical domination part. Then you go through the transition between rape and just bad sex. And like it or not, such a transition exists. I mean, for example, well, it was fully consensual to start with, but when we went at it, the sex was just awful. And at the end, I asked them to stop, but they finished anyway. Or, well, the sex was just awful, and I wanted them to stop, but I didn't let them know, because, well, whatever, they were my friend, and I didn't want to hurt their feelings, or they'd made a real sweet effort earlier to make me feel special, and whatever. This then bleeds into the weakest claims of rape, which are of the ilk that, sure, I chose of my own volition to get drunk off my face, full in the knowledge that such intoxication in a public place was going to make me more gregarious.
So the first piece of evidence presented by Kevin is Thunderfoot. Thunderfoot is an anti-feminist, but he doesn't advocate for men's rights, nor does he identify as an MRA, which means he's not an MRA. Next.
He'll often intercept a girl moving through the club. You know, he'll just snatch her up. Hey! With like what we like to call an aggressive grab that cannot work. It's like, hey, bam, get in front of her, drag her in, and be like, you're this and that, da-da-da-da-da. And when she gives him that what the fuck look, he'll often reply something like, one of his favorite lines is, I feel like I'm so incredibly good looking that I can just do whatever I want.
So my first impression of this guy is that he is a pickup artist. But because Kevin didn't include links to these clips, very convenient for Kevin, I had to do a fair bit of internet detective work to figure out this clip's origin. I started with the channel icon down in the bottom right corner, although this was very blurry and not easy to read. But this eventually led me to a guy called Luke Appeal, who put together a video exposing pickup artists, or to be more specific, Julian Blank and his Real Social Dynamics group of pickup artists, who have nothing to do with men's rights. Kevin even trimmed Julian's name off the start of the clip, presumably to make it harder to identify who the clip really is about.
All right, huge difference. So Julian's stating his intentions right up front, basically. Julian, you'll often hear some girl moving through the club, you know, he'll just snatch her up, hey, with like what we like to call an aggressive grab that cannot work. Just like, hey, bam, get in front of her, drag her in.
It may not seem like a big deal, and could just be a fluke of Kevin's editing, but if he had have left the name Julian at the start of the clip, it would have been easier to identify its origins. And considering Kevin doesn't link to any of these clips, or doesn't bother to identify who the clip is from, I can't help but be suspicious. And for the record, Kevin, chasing pussy is not a men's rights issue. Next.
Drunken sex, not fucking rape. It is on fucking you.
Oh look, it's War Corpse 666. No relation, by the way. War Corpse is one of the feminists' favorite examples of why MRAs are so bad. Unfortunately for them, as I have shown previously in this series, War Corpse is not a MRA. He is an anti-feminist, but he is also anti-MRA. In fact, he thinks MRAs are just as bad as feminists. This belief, as far as I can tell, is based on feminist propaganda, which is ironic considering he's an anti-feminist. Well, I guess no one's ever accused him of being a genius. I'm deadly serious, trust me, no one's ever considered him a genius. Literally no one. He actually makes Kevin look intelligent by comparison. Next. So once again, Kevin does not supply a link, he doesn't even tell us who the quote is from. He probably doesn't even know who it's from, come to think of it. But I tracked it down. This one is actually from an MRA, in fact you would be hard-pressed to find a more prominent MRA. This quote is actually from Warren Farrell. So let's have a look at it in context. Here is the full quote. If a man ignoring a woman's verbal no is committing date rape, then a woman who says no with her verbal language but yes with her body language is committing date fraud. And a woman who continues to be sexual even after she says no is committing date lying. Do women still do this? Two feminists found the answer is yes. Nearly 40% of college women acknowledged they had said no to sex even when they meant yes. In my own work with over 150,000 men and women, about half of whom are single, the answer is also yes. Almost all single women acknowledge they have agreed to go back to a guy's place, just to talk, but were nevertheless responsive to his first kiss. Almost all acknowledge they've recently said something like that's far enough for now, even as her lips are still kissing and her tongue is still touching his. We have forgotten that before we called this date rape and date fraud, we called it exciting. Somehow, women's romance novels are not titled He Stopped When I Said No. They are, though, titled Sweet Savage Love, in which the woman rejects the hand of her gentler lover who saves her from the rapist and marries the man who repeatedly and savagely rapes her. It is this marry the rapist theme that not only turned Sweet Savage Love into a bestseller but also into one of women's most enduring romance novels. And it is Red Butler, carrying the kicking and screaming Scarlett O'Hara to bed, who is a hero to females, not to males, in Gone with the Wind, the best-selling romance novel of all time, to women. It is important that a woman's no's be respected and her yeses be respected. And it is also important when her non-verbal yeses, tongue still touching, conflict with those verbal no's, that the man not be put in jail for choosing the yes over the no. And considering the worldwide success of both the novel and film version of 50 Shades of Grey, Warren might have a point. Obviously women don't want to be raped. But it's also equally obvious that most women want to be pursued, at least by males they find attractive. And this ambiguous maybe yes, Maybe no, stuff will always be the case until women start making the first move. But that requires the risk of rejection, doesn't it? Man up, ladies, it's time you started acting like equals. Next.
Anytime a woman publicly broadcasts a rape before using the proper channels before going to the authorities means that she is a liar and in fact was not raped.
Oh boy. Kevin is now using pickup artist Rush V as an example of an MRA. So let's have a look at what Rush V thinks of men's rights activists. From Rush V's website, Return of Kings, it states, "We are generally against men's rights and how they portray men as victims in need of state assistance. See, the men's rights movement is no place for men. Women and homosexuals are strongly discouraged from commenting here." So no, Rush and the other pickup artists are not MRAs. But Kevin doesn't seem to understand this or even care. On Kevin's 10 Worst Lies video, Necropanda asks Kevin, "Do you actually believe that Orini and Rush are MRAs?" Kevin answers, yes I do. And on my video, Propaganda of Toxic Feminism Part 23, I asked Kevin whether Rush V was an MRA. Kevin replied, yes, he spews the same rhetoric. You, or indeed he, can claim he isn't an MRA all you want, it doesn't change anything. Would you accept it if an opponent of yours claimed not to be a feminist, even if they used feminist arguments? So I guess the question we need to ask then is Kevin right? Does Rush and other pickup artists spew the same rhetoric? Do we have the same worldview, the same goals, the same methods? Ironically, Kevin himself answered this earlier in his own video.
Also, it runs counter to the PUA arguments that get put around about men spreading their super serum as widely as possible, and then obviously the ensuing deadbeat dads. It's almost as if they don't have a coherent worldview at all and they're just making shit up as they go along based upon their own bigoted biases.
So on one hand, Kevin is asserting that MRAs and PUAs are the same group, as they share the same arguments, yet at the same time acknowledges that our worldviews are different, and in his words, not coherent. Amazingly, it never once occurs to him that maybe our worldviews are different, because we are not the same group. We basically share one common thing with PUAs, and that is that most MRAs, and most PUAs are anti-feminist. That does not mean we share anything else in common. Using Kevin's logic, he must be a pickup artist, because he shares anti-MRA views with Rush V and other pickup artists. Of course, this argument would be stupid, as he shares no other beliefs with the PUAs, yet his argument against us is no different. So here is my challenge to Kevin, and other feminists like him. If the views you have presented here are typical of MRAs like you claim, then why not use actual clips from self-identifying MRAs? It would make your case stronger, and much harder to refute. You have nothing to lose by it, and everything to gain. So why is it that people like yourself, Kevin, only use people who you think, in your opinion, sound like MRAs? Are you just too lazy to find actual MRAs? Do you actually have no idea what an MRA really is, because you've only ever encountered straw fedoras? Or is it because you couldn't find enough evidence to make a strong case, and therefore have no choice but to use false associations? Once again, Kevin, if there is no difference between MRAs and the others you have presented here, then why not exclusively use MRAs? It's a simple question. No doubt one you'll ignore. One more thing before moving on to the next segment. Just before I mentioned a study called Prevalence and Psychological Sequelae of Self-Reported Childhood Physical and Sexual Abuse in the General Population Sample of Men and Women. One of the authors was Diana M. Elliott. October 16, 2008, California Psychologist Board revoked Diana M. Elliott's license for non-compliance with earlier discipline related to testimony in divorce case. The California Board of Psychology revoked the license of Diana M. Elliott, Ph.D., for failure to comply with the terms of an earlier probation order against her. In March 2004, the board charged Elliott with gross negligence, dishonesty and repeated negligent acts related to her testimony in a divorce matter in which she reported the results of psychological tests according to her memory, which was later discovered to be faulty, did not correspond to the actual answer sheets she had on file, and that in response to the trial court's order for her to send the original answer sheets to the father's expert, she sent copies which were altered to make the father look more disturbed and mother look healthier than the actual answer sheets did. Elliot had changed the test score answers. Lastly, Elliot failed to inform the court that the father was administered the test via an interpreter and failed to inform the court that her testimony was based on inaccurate information. Her inaccurate testimony adversely affected the ability of the court to make an assessment of the child custody issues. As a result, Elliot was placed on probation for 3 years with terms and conditions, which she did not comply with. I just thought I'd leave that here. Next.
G'day viewers and welcome to Wangathat Wednesday. Wangathat's an acronym that means I'm going to tell you who am I not giving a fuck about today. And today, I'm not giving a fuck about men's rights activists who think you should boycott the new Mad Max movie, Fury Road.
Oh no. Not this guy. Please, anyone but this guy. All he does is scream the words fuck and cunt, and somehow thinks he's making some kind of coherent logical argument. Can't we do a couple of Claudia Boulain clips? She hasn't appeared in this series for ages. Or maybe Laughing Witch? Oh well, I guess I better just bite the bullet and get this over with. But I'm going to have to prepare for this one. Yeah, a lot of preparing will be needed.
Now, when this story broke, I thought it was a joke, basically. We're just going, yeah, men's rights activists, worst whining man babies on the planet. The idea that there might be a strong female character in this movie, too much for their tiny little brains. And I took the story that they were writing this up as being some affront to masculinity as apocryphal. But there is at least one fairly well-known MRA site called, I think, Return of Kings or something stupid.
Okay, that's about all I can take of that guy, even with 2 bottles of, medication. So I left a message on his video explaining that Return of Kings is not an MRA site, and even quoted from the site, where they clearly state they are anti-MRA, but for some strange reason my comment vanished. Strange that. But unfortunately, as we saw earlier, Angry Aussie is not the only one spreading this bullshit. So let's have a quick look at some of the others. Let's have a look at Arthur Chu's article for the Daily Beast. The article is called, Mad Max, How Men's Rights Activists Killed the World. I admit it, the main reason I bought an opening weekend ticket for Mad Max, Fury Road was to, specifically, piss off the various men's rights advocates angrily telling me that, as a man, I should boycott it for being feminist propaganda. Various men's rights advocates? By men's rights advocates, he actually means, pick-up artists, as he links to Return of Kings. And by the word, various, he means one individual. So poor old Arthur isn't off to a good start. He clearly doesn't understand numbers, or possibly the word various. And he clearly doesn't understand the difference between a group fighting for men's issues, and a group chasing pussy. And a little deeper into the article. But it was, first and foremost and above all else, a Mad Max movie. And the most interesting thing about Fury Road is how it reveals that, contra the wailing of Return of Kings, resident economist, Aaron Clary, the Mad Max franchise has always on some level been a feminist franchise. It's a franchise about toxic masculinity, and how all of us, including the good guys, are infected by it, and how there's no hope unless we can someday build a world without it, which might mean building a world without ourselves. A world without ourselves? That phrase speaks volumes, doesn't it? It would seem that Arthur only sees the bad in masculinity, and only the good in femininity. Hardly equality. It seems Arthur thinks the world would be a non-violent paradise, a vaginal utopia, without evil old testosterone. I guess Arthur is one of the few good men, of course, presumably his rape switch is permanently in the off position, because he's devoid of all that yucky toxic masculinity. You see, Arthur too is a female supremacist. Just as a white supremacist might argue that all the world's woes are caused by blacks, or Jews, or whoever, and that only a pure white race can create an easily sunburnt utopia. Arthur thinks all the world's woes are caused by males, and yearns for the comforting embrace of the vagina utopia. Even Kevin acknowledges this type of thing.
Now, I freely admit there are a small number of feminists who want to impose a matriarchy and who probably do hate men.
Towards the end of Arthur's article, one of my own male role models, Kurt Cobain, said, "Women are the only future in rock and roll." I'd apply that to culture in general. Not that women are genetically or inherently superior, not that there's nothing wrong with our culture's idea of femininity, but the most toxic behaviors, the ones that killed the world and continue to kill it, they're all packaged together in the culturally approved madness we call masculinity. And our best hope might be handing the reins to the half of the population that wasn't raised to call that madness their birthright. You know, after reading this, I've got an image in my head of Arthur too, sitting naked in the corner of his room, whipping his back with a flail, and repeating the phrase, "I'm a good boy, mummy," over and over again. Of course he finishes off his article with, "And Mad Max, of all places, came out with a message against that nonsense 30 years ago, with Beyond Thunderdome, which is when Clary should have started writing about Miller as a betrayer of manhood, assuming he was old enough to read and write then, when Tina Turner, a strong female leader figure 30 years before Charlize Theron, sang a song that sums up activism, feminism, and the problem with male allies in one line. We don't need another hero. Admittedly, it's been a long time since I've seen Beyond Thunderdome. I personally think it's the weakest of the first 3 Mad Max movies. But, from memory, wasn't Tina Turner's character the bad guy? Wasn't she the power-crazed evil leader? You know, the type of thing Arthur would, no doubt, call toxic masculinity, if it was a male character? But because Tina Turner is female, and not just a female, but a female of color, because of this good old Arthur sees her as a strong female leader figure 30 years before Charlize Theron. Thanks Arthur, for giving us such a good example of feminist equality. Next we have an article from that bastion of quality journalism, the Mary Sue. It's titled, "Incredibly Peeved Men's Rights Activists Call for Boycott of Mad Max, Are Unintentionally Hilarious." And just to show how unbiased they really are, they have this image in their article. So not only are they falsely claiming that Return of Kings is a men's rights activist group, but they are also resorting to shaming tactics. Typical feminist journalism, in other words. And then there is the article in Screen Crush. Mad Max, Fury Road feminism upsets men's rights activists, and that's a good thing. The article starts with, "Men's rights activists, aka MRAs, are a quaint, primitive little group, one that preaches insidious ideals about oppressing women and rejecting social justice. Their latest crusade targets Mad Max, Fury Road, George Miller's long-awaited new installment in his beloved Mad Max franchise. It appears that the MRAs have fallen victim to a bait-and-switch. This film isn't the explosive action flick they were promised, but it is. Instead, it's a movie with a feminist propaganda. Preaches insidious ideals about oppressing women? Really? Isn't it interesting that the author makes this claim without any examples or evidence? I mean, why not start the article by poisoning the well? After all, it's not like the title is even accurate. And a little further in the article. The truth is this, Mad Max, Fury Road is indeed a feminist piece. Similar to last year's Edge of Tomorrow, George Miller's post-apocalyptic action masterpiece sells audiences on the promise of Tom Hardy as Mad Max, only to discover that this is, mostly, Theron's film. And it's not just Theron's film. This movie belongs to all the women of Fury Road, women who are oppressed by a predominantly white male culture. The nefarious Immortan Joe keeps a harem of wives, carefully selected based on their attractiveness, their only purpose to breed new heirs who will become soldiers. Immortan also keeps a stable of women whose only purpose in life is lactating and providing nourishment for Immortan's chosen flock of men. So here the author seems to be backing up what Aaron Clary's article said. Although I should say, what I've read about Clary's article, as I have purposely not read his article at this point, and don't intend to until I've seen the movie. At which point I might make a video on it, if I think it's needed. But it would seem that one of Clary's main gripes about the movie is the fact, backed up here in the article from Screen Crush, that Theron's character gets more airtime than Tom Hardy's Mad Max character. If this is indeed the case, then Clary might have a point. I mean, I'm a huge fan of the Alien franchise, and if a new installment came out which had Ripley as a background character, and someone else in the lead, I might be pissed off, as Ripley is such a cornerstone of that series. Excluding prequels and crossovers, of course, the series really is about her, even though she isn't a title character as is the case with Mad Max. But then again, I would have to judge the overall quality of the movie based on all its elements, not just that individual one. And although it's very possible that the new Mad Max is feminist-inspired propaganda, it's also possible that Theron got more screen time because she is arguably a bigger name actor than Hardy. Who knows? Of course this is all just speculation on my behalf until I see it. But let's assume for argument's sake, that it is feminist propaganda, and it's promoting strong female characters over strong male ones. So what? Who gives a fuck? Either it will work, be a success, and be repeated. Or it won't, and Hollywood will go back to the old formula of male action hero stars. Hollywood is about making money. If feminist propaganda sells, then that's what they will make. If it doesn't, then they won't. This of course is the exact same argument Gamergate has used against those who support Sarkeesian. Ultimately game developers are interested in what sells. If that means male-orientated combat action games, then that's what they will make. If on the other hand it's Depression Quest, then that's what they will make. Ultimately people will vote with their wallets, and the creators, be they Hollywood, or game developers, or breakfast cereal manufacturers for that matter, will respond. If there is a plot to castrate the male action hero, it will only succeed or fail based on its popularity. Next.
So, but kind of segueing into our controversy discussion, Fury Road, a lot of people loved it. And then there are some people who really didn't. And for real, this is something that people have already been talking about. We kind of discussed it a little bit the last show, which was the ridiculous. I'm still in awe of this. There was a guy who, and I think it's only one so far that did this, but there is a guy named Aaron Clary who wrote a piece about it being a feminist piece of propaganda posing as a
the men's rights activists.
Yeah.
Do I have to say it again? He's not a fucking MRA.
And
oh my god, men's rights.
And
idiots.
He was actually called.
Whoa, don't infringe on my rights to be an idiot.
He's
Meninist.
He was calling for a boycott of the film, which
and I want to be perfectly clear. I haven't seen it because I'm poor, not because I'm boycotting it.
And it's funny, you read this and he's talking about the fact that, you know, Charlize Theron's character is far too equal to Max, I guess, and that it's more of her movie than anything else. And then he actually said something really stupid. He actually was saying it was something about American culture ruined and rewritten right in front of their very eyes. When in fact, dumbass, it's an Australian film that was done in Australia, written by an Australian.
But we do tend to take everything and make it our own.
Well, the fact that the guy didn't even, he hasn't, at the time he wrote it, he hadn't even seen the film. Secondly,
why would you need to see it?
Well, and I mean, this guy also goes on and on in this thing about how women they need to like keep the strong patriarchal values, and women can't be equal to men, and that women need to stay in their roles where they are, and they should not be elevated to this. Women, like, basically, like, women need to be in the kitchen making sandwiches. Like, that's their entire thing. That's like their entire thing goes off of that. Their role as men is to be over women.
That's their entire thing? Really? So discussing male circumcision, the problem of male homeless, male suicide, fathers' parental rights, the sentencing gap, and the demonization of masculinity in the media, is all about wanting women to make us some sandwiches? Really? I'll tell you what, if I promise to make my own sandwiches, do you think we could then talk about actual fucking issues? Just maybe? As for Aaron Clary's article, as previously stated, I won't have an opinion on it until I've seen the movie. I might think it hits the nail right on the head, or I might think it's total bullshit. Most likely my opinion will fall somewhere in between. However, he does have the right to his opinion. If he sees it as propaganda, he's entitled to say so. Just as Anita Sarkeesian is entitled to see Lego as sexist. Hey baby, nice legs. Show us your tits. I know you want to. I've got a yellow plastic heart-on with your name on it. And others are entitled to respond and say, hey, I think you're wrong and your opinion sucks. But what I object to, is that so many of these so-called journalists use this as an excuse to bash MRAs. If you want to criticize the pickup artists for something they've said, fine, go right ahead and do so. And if you want to criticize the men's rights movement for something we've said, fine, go ahead and do so. But don't try to characterize the two groups as one to spread bullshit propaganda. And don't hold me accountable for what others, who have nothing to fucking do with me, have said. It shows the desperation of our opposition. It shows that they can only attack us through mischaracterization, lies, half-truths, and propaganda. What a shame that they would spend so much time talking about one man's opinion of a movie, when they could actually have been addressing real issues and real concerns. What a shame they could not spend a fraction of that time and energy talking about such things as male genital mutilation or the sentencing gap. But feminism is for males too, right? Well, that's what they keep telling us. Shame it's not true. Anyway folks, that's another episode done and dusted. So until next time, don't drink the poison Kool-Aid.
Feminists want to turn everything into rape.
Yes, I've been getting raped. I don't even remember since when. Maybe it started when I came out of my mother's womb. I get raped at several places: trains, public buses, offices, even at my own house.
MRAs will tell you that feminists want to redefine the word rape to mean basically anything so they can incriminate men and make all men rapists.
I got raped when my dad hit my mom. I got raped when my mother called someone else's daughter a slut. I got raped when my brother teased someone else's sister. I get raped every day, several times, by thoughts, by words, by looks. I try to see their faces, but I can't see them. I only see my family.
Feminists want to turn everything into rape.
I draw a lot of parallels between the position that animals are placed in when they're being carried or held by a human being and the position that women are placed in during intercourse with a man. So in both instances, there's no universal experience. Some animals enjoy being carried by a human being. Some animals enjoy being held, just like some women enjoy intercourse. So it's not really the pleasure aspect that's At stake, it's more of the power dynamic, because in both of these scenarios, you have a situation in which one person is at the hands and mercy of their oppressor. Generally speaking, in both of these scenarios, both the woman and the animal are placed in very compromising positions at the hands of a physically dominant or physically stronger oppressor. Any appeal to stop or escape the situation must first be approved by the oppressor. In the case that the oppressor doesn't comply, if the